The paint code I have for my GX470 is Blizzard Pearl. It was available on all model years of the GX470, so that's 2003 through 2009. Lexus entered a recall for this paint code for 2008 and 2009 model years, but unfortunately for the earlier GX owners, it is the same paint code and it still does suffer the same clear coat and fading issues, but they are not included in the recall for whatever reason. My GX470 is a 2004. I have not had any paint issues and I live in Texas. The truck does spend most of its day outside, so I think it's really hit or miss on who suffers from the paint issue. One thing to note is that the air springs will fail eventually, regardless of if you off-road hard or end up having a user failure like me. They do wear out, so eventually you'll have to either replace the spring with a factory air spring, or you can just move to a cheap coil spring option that does delete your ride height adjustability though. This next issue is pretty common with 4Runners of this generation, and also the Tacomas. They all share a similar front design. I think they use the same CV axles, but regardless, this band right here will come loose or just wear with time, and the CV axle will start leaking fluid. Usually this is misdiagnosed as a completely failing CV axle, but if you catch it early, you can reseal the CV boot with some grease and a new band, and you will be good to go. So I caught this CV boot leaking, and I replaced it with a rounded off clamp from McMaster Car. I caught it, I believe, right when it started leaking, so I did not refill it with any grease, and I've had no issues since then, and it's been about 20,000 miles. I'm aware that this kind of offset bolt right there could cause some maybe harmonic issues because it's not centerline with the axle, but I have not had any issues with it. I don't feel any vibrations, so maybe I got lucky, but maybe I didn't. Another weakness of the GX470 is the rotors that come stock with. They will end up warping under heavy braking or while towing. So I had issues when I was towing my other car with the GX. So I ended up replacing the factory rotors and pads with a kit from Rock Auto. I will link that kit in the description. I have not had any issues with the kit in the past, I think 30,000 miles. So it's definitely a worthwhile upgrade if you are looking to tow something or if your rotors are going out. The Blizzard white paint was not the only recall issue that Lexus had with the GX470. I believe Toyota 4Runners had the following issue as well, and that is that the plastic dash will crack and start to look really, really ugly. It can start to crack around this crease right here. I've seen that in person, over around in here, and the dash can just continue to spiderweb. This recall ended back in, I believe, 2018. So if your truck still has a cracked dash, you are out of luck. But Lexus did replace them for free up until 2018. I got mine replaced. It took about, I think, like 6 months of being on a waiting list. And I did not have that many issues with the dash beforehand, but I just wanted to get basically a brand new dash for free. On GX470 forums, you'll find people who say that people should not buy the touchscreen navigation models because these will sometimes fail and render the whole center console kind of useless. I kind of disagree with that. I have not seen that many of these fail. Mine is ticking along fine. And while they're right, you would lose some functionality of the dash. You still would have air conditioning because you can control air conditioning with the temp buttons on either side, and you can just automatically make it blow cold by pressing the auto button. It's also really nice to have a backup camera and the maintenance filer in the dash, where you can keep track of everything you need to replace. In case the dash did break, there is an option from Phoenix Automotive. I think it's about $500, and it replaces the entire center stack. And it will also give you things like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and some other cool options. So I think this issue is really overblown, but I felt I had to mention it because of how often I hear the non-nav models recommended. Didn't have any issues with my dash before the recall, but I just wanted to get a new one installed by Lexus because it was a free dash. So on the GX470, you have full-time all-wheel drive with a high and low range and a center locking diff. People sometimes have issues with that center locking diff, and those usually stem from actually not using it. The actuator can become seized and the diff will no longer lock. So what I do is once a month I cycle the car through the high-low range and lock the diff, just to keep the grease and fluids and whatever's in there moving around. I made a little modification to the rear hatch of my GX470. Usually there is a handle placed right here. The OEM handle looks like that. However, they are incredibly weak as well, just like the key, and these tabs, I don't know if you can see it, right there will break and will no longer hold into the rear door. So I will post a link in the description about the hardware needed for this modification. Basically, it's just a couple washers, some bolts, and some cap nuts. And you take the rear panel off and you put them in the holes where the old handle went, and then you can put like a tow strap or some kind of like Jeep handle there, and that should not break or ever fail. This is the key I use for my GX470. This is the backup key that the truck came with. It doesn't have buttons. It's literally just a key. But the truck does come stock with a key and key fob that has buttons for unlocking and locking and the panic alarm. But unfortunately, the plastic used to make those keys is really, really weak. So I've had two of them and they have both cracked and snapped and broken on me. So I'm in the process right now of buying a more reinforced key case off of Amazon and transplanting the internals of the OEM keys into it.